That's cheating. If you're going to play the mystery card on that big question, what other questions are you also going to play that card on? Ones that don't seem nearly as important most days. I like to summarize it by saying this. If my slides will work. Well, the next one's supposed to say, every one of these things have a little bit of truth. And there we go. Everyone has a little bit of truth, but none of them on their own provide a satisfying answer to why a good and powerful God doesn't prevent genuine evil. Now, I want to be clear about this. This morning, I'm not questioning the motives of people who say all the things that I just went through. I think oftentimes people have good and loving motives. They say things that don't make theological sense. So I'm not questioning anyone's motives this morning. What I'm questioning is that the usual answers, at least to me, aren't satisfying. I'm guessing they're not very satisfying to most of you either. I'm guessing I'm not the only one in this building this morning who's really tired of the cliches they hear when it comes to why a loving God doesn't stop the crap that happens in our lives and happens in the world. This morning, I'm going to take my neck, stick it way out, and offer a solution to this question. How's that for audacity? I'm going to solve the problem of evil. And I'm not just messing around. I'm actually going to offer some ideas that I think that when taken together actually give us a plausible answer to why a good and loving God doesn't stop genuine evil, doesn't prevent it. The first part of this answer, and they come in this book, God Can't. The first answer is in the book's title. It simply says, God can't stop evil single-handedly. God can't. Did you know, if you're like me and you read the Bible a lot, did you know that the Bible has many statements saying there are things God simply can't do? Most of my evangelical friends are totally shocked by this because the God they read in the Bible is doing everything all the time, nothing's impossible, yada, yada. And then I point to the book of Hebrews where it says God can't tell a lie. I point to the book of James. It says God can't be tempted. The psalmist says God can't grow tired. My favorite one, though, is when Paul is writing to Timothy. Paul says, when we are faithless, God remains faithful because God cannot deny himself. God can't go against God's own nature. I think God's nature is uncontrolling love. It's a love that gives and others empowers, and God simply can't control because to control would be to go against God's own love. God calls upon you and I to cooperate in God's work in the world. So God is working to overcome and prevent evil, but can't do it single-handedly. I know, that's a wild idea. That's something that many of you are going to have to think on a little bit. But that's the first of 5 ideas. The second idea says that God cares for and empathizes with us. In the midst of our deepest suffering, God is with us, caring for us, feeling what we feel. We're not alone. God hasn't abandoned and forsaken us. Now, this idea that God cares for us and feels what we feel is actually kind of becoming popular in Christian thought, especially amongst even more conservative theologians. But usually they want to stop there. They want to say God feels what we feel, but they don't have an answer to why God didn't stop something in the first place. This morning we met Whoopsie. Whoopsie, where are you? Right back there? Can I use that? Is it okay if I use your name? Sure. I'd like to use you as an example this morning. I didn't even ask her, but she doesn't have to do anything. Suppose right now an earthquake hit. Suppose this whole church starts rocking and rolling, and one of these big beams comes down, crashing right down in the midst of the congregation, and it lands right on Whoopsie. She's laying on the floor. This big beam is on her chest. She's gasping for air. It looks like she's probably not going to live unless this beam gets taken off of her. Now, suppose I haven't been crushed. Suppose I look at the beam and I say, you know what? I can see that given the angle here, I could actually push the beam off Whoopsie and save her life. But I say to myself, God empathizes with us in the midst of our struggling. And if I have a usual view of God's power, God could get rid of that beam, but God's really in the empathy business. So I come up and, in the effort to imitate God, hold Whoopsie's hand as she dies and say, I just really care for you right now. I feel your pain. I could help you out. I could rescue you, but I'm here with you. Nobody's going to say, that Tom guy, whew, what a loving guy he is. He just holds people's hand and lets them die when he could save them. There's got to be more than empathy. It's important, but there's got to be more. The third idea is that God is working to heal to the greatest extent possible. But God needs some kind of cooperation with us, our bodies, or the world. God is in the healing business, but we don't blame victims when they're not healed. We don't say they didn't have enough faith. Instead, we say there were conditions that weren't aligned in their bodies or in their environment or in their relationships. And God is working with them and all creation to bring about the greatest amount of healing possible in the circumstance. Number 4, God, I think, works to squeeze something good out of the bad God didn't want in the first place. I'm curious, has anybody in this congregation heard of a woman named Joni Eareckson Tada? Few people, not many. She was like a superstar when I was younger in the evangelical speaking circuit. At age 17, she was with her family in the Chesapeake Bay. She dove out of her boat, hit a rock, and was paralyzed from the neck down. She responded to this by writing numerous best-selling books, recording albums. She's had like 6 honorary doctorates given to her. She started a group for disabilities. She can paint with her teeth. Amazing, amazing paintings. And she is just a really virtuous person. However, Joni thinks she was paralyzed because God was punishing her for sin. Joni thinks she's in the condition she's in because at age 17, she just really wasn't living the perfect Christian life. I don't buy that at all. I don't think God wants people to become paralyzed, but no matter who we are, no matter what our situation, God is working to try to squeeze whatever good can be squeezed out of the bad situation God didn't cause or even want in the first place. That's important. That's hopeful. And finally, I think you and I, whoops, we didn't get that. We go too far? Whoops. Thank you. Finally, I think God is calling upon you and me to join with God in this work of love. God actually needs our cooperation. I know that sounds kind of wild maybe. The God of the universe needs our cooperation. I know lots of folks who say, isn't it amazing the sovereign God of the universe has decided to to allow us to help out, but they kind of believe that in the back of their minds, God could just go ahead and fix things if God wanted to. That, God really doesn't need us. It's like the preschool teacher who's got a bunch of 3-year-olds and says to the preschool kids, okay, everyone needs to help clean up the toys or nobody gets to go home tonight. Now, in reality, if they don't help, the teacher will just do it. Most people think that's the way God is. God says, help, be a part of this project, participate in what I'm doing in the world. But if we don't, no problem, God will just do it. It makes our lives ultimately insignificant. It makes what we do ultimately not really matter. In this scheme, God really needs our cooperation. Love can't win in the way God wants it to win unless you and I cooperate with God's calls to love in our lives.